This week on the podcast, we have Kyle Wagner. Kyle is a high school baseball coach. He's a math teacher, but he thinks about the game in a different light than most of the coaches that I talk to. And I think he's a fantastic coach to have on the podcast because he looks at the game from just a different lens. And so in this episode, we get into coaching at the high school level. We get into player development, parents, how to handle parents, how to go about helping players throughout their journey as a student athlete, and then we get into recruiting, some other different things. So this is going to be a great episode. Kyle always brings a unique insight into player development, into recruiting. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Hope you like this one with Kyle Wagner. All right, we now welcome onto the podcast Kyle Wagner. Kyle, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I tell you what, I remember a few years back you were on the podcast. This is your second time, and I know obviously you've learned maybe some different things since the last time you've been on. Maybe some of the things you doubled down on as a coach. But one of the cool things that you're doing now is you're head baseball coach again, high school baseball at Cumberland Valley. Take me through like what made you want to get back into coaching at the high school level. I think I personally have always thought that coaching high school baseball is the hardest level to coach at because there's just so many different things and different backgrounds of players and parents and everything else. I feel like you're the perfect fit for that. But why get back into coaching at the high school level?
I was coaching three sports after I got out of baseball. I coached softball and I coached field hockey and I was coaching basketball. And I just, I tell people I'm not a really good assistant coach. Like I just feel like I want to try to create the culture and with respect to baseball, it's the sport I know the best. And my son graduated from Purdue and just felt like a perfect storm. Like, my springs opened up a little bit and Cumberland Valley in our area, central Pennsylvania, it's definitely a power. And they actually came to me and said, would you be interested in? So I was ready. I was ready to be a head coach again. I was ready to create culture. I was ready to get back in with the sport I know the best. So that seemed like an easy fit.
Anything different you're doing now when you're starting versus when you were coaching before? Like, is there anything that stands out to you or you maybe consciously decided to do differently?
Well, I think, I had a chance to, I was away from the game, from the dugout for so long, from this type of athlete, the high school athlete. I was involved with travel baseball, and then I watched my son and nephew at Georgia, and I tried to pick up pieces here and there. I think I'm better suited for creating culture than when I left. I think my view is a little bit more holistic with respect to the JVs and the varsity. Like even the other day, we ran a really good practice, and my assistant coaches didn't know that the seniors created it. Like I reached out to the seniors and I said, "Hey, I want to do this. This is definitely what I want in, but you pick three other things." And they were like, "Man, this was a great one today." And I said, "Well, just so you know, our seniors did it." And so I think that would have been hard for me back in the day to turn things over to a senior group and say, "Hey, you set the practice." I was a little bit more controlling when I was younger, but if you're trying to create ownership with your athletes, I think every now and then you let them create a practice, and I think it goes a long way. So I guess maybe that.
I remember you saying one time that one of the things that maybe you shouldn't have done is you gave players, hopefully I don't botch this, too much information at times at the high school level. And I think what was an example of you giving a player like too much information?
Well, like so, one of the things that high school players have to discern the difference between is like a straight steal and like what people will call a run and hit, or what we call just we want you in motion. So like for instance, like a 3-1 or 3-2 count. you want your runner in motion for multiple reasons. Double in the gap scores a run. Stay out of a double play. It's just one of those strategical decisions that coaches make. And one of the things I'm actually wrestling with now is if I put someone in motion, like how much information do I want to give the batter? How much do I want is in his head with that runner in motion? Because I certainly don't want him thinking like, well, I have to protect the runner because he's in motion. Certainly with a three ball count, he's allowed to take it. But if I put you in motion with a 1-1 count, do I want you being overly sensitive to what it is I'm trying to do, or do I want you just focusing on the pitch at hand? So like I'm constantly thinking about that. And I've actually decided that there are three modes that I want to operate under. Favorite mode is what I'm calling green light. It's like they're free to swing and they're free to run, and they're going to know who those guys are. I mean, I'm not going to turn everyone loose, but my favorite mode of operation is let's do what we do best, and hopefully you don't need the coach in the third base box. And then I want a pitch by pitch mode where I want you to check with me if this game is getting close and I need to intervene to help. And then there's a third mode too. But to your point, I'm very sensitive to information being too much where it slows them down in between the lines. That's I work hard at my craft. I work hard at understanding all the nuances to the game, but ultimately, if our guys aren't playing fast, and I've complicated it, then in some way I've paralyzed them, then I've done them a disservice. So I'm really sensitive to that.
Hmm. What about talking about? I liked one of your tweets. I think this maybe a couple weeks ago where I don't even, I remember the word you tweeted. I didn't even know what the word was. I actually had to Google it. But it was about MLB teams not taking something into consideration when it comes to like bunting or
Oh,
things like that. Do you recall what I'm talking about?
the ergodicity or ergodic
Yes, yes.
model.
Could you explain what the tweet was and like
Yeah.
what you meant by that?
So I'm a statistics teacher too, and I actually told my class the other day it is literally my favorite thing to teach in statistics. And uh, basically, uh, uh, what an ergodic model is it means a sample of 1,000 things done one time would be the same thing as one thing done 1,000 times. Okay, so when those two things are the same, those two things are ergodic. And what often is the case is things become non-ergodic. And you could use like a Russian roulette example. You got a six-gun chamber. You got five chambers that don't have a bullet. You got one with a bullet. The expected value might say, well, you could go ahead and play Russian roulette because 5 out of 6 times you'll be fine. But that one time, it's over. Game over. Like you don't get a reset button. And so in Major League Baseball, so much of our decision making that you look at averages, you're looking at expected values. You've taken a huge sample of 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 events that occurred at this time, and you've run an expected value. But coaches don't think in terms of large samples or what they call an ensemble. What they think of are these path dependent models. And when you fail, when you go to ruin, when your at bat or your inning is terminated or the game is terminated, all of the other what they call, I love it, parallel universes mean nothing else. They mean nothing else. You cannot go access parallel universes. And so I think when it comes to like the sacrifice bunt, like even last night, the Yankees um, Indians game was phenomenal, and there was a bunt there that the Indians advanced the guy, and yes, he got to third base with 2 outs. So in some respect, you're like, well, maybe the bunt didn't play out because he still had to hit a home run with 2 outs. But potentially the double play, if you don't bunt, you bring the double play in order. The Yankees got a great middle infield. I'll shout out to Volpe. But like if you turn a double play, like it's ruined. It's over. So I just think uh, I'll talk about that whenever, whatever chance I can get. That idea of ergodicity. I think it's just this one mathematical concept that eludes so many baseball analysts.
So it has something to do with like you don't take into consideration, like the context of the game and like how the game's flowing, like the energy that you're, was that also, would that be applicable too?
Yeah, for sure. Anytime you think I'm going to say something here, but I tell my students the average person has one testicle, right? Like that gives you some insight into how average can be so misleading. Is when you say that I'm 100% accurate in that comment. I mean, if you have people with zero and people with two testicles, well, the average person has one, but then the average hits no one. It literally hits no one. And so when you are making in-game decisions and you are counting on an expected value, you are using models that might not fit your team. You are using models that might not fit the emotion of the pitcher on the mound. I mean, many a pitcher panics on PFP. They panic. You can rep it all you want, but that emotion in the game, he's going to throw that ball away. So I just think context is eroded when you start talking in terms of average. And there's plenty of people that I admire that have done a lot of work on this. Todd Rose is a name that comes to mind. He wrote a book called The End of Average, and that was really one of those books that helped me solidify my thinking with this.
Is there anything else that you see at the major league level done like that they're doing that you don't agree with outside of what we're talking about right here? Whether that be maybe how they're calling games, how they're using players in situations, training, just anything like that that you see, they're like, I don't think this is good long term for the game or for younger players watching it.
I don't know if I can speak to that. Like I'm not in on the inside, so I don't know. I will say that I think any coach that enjoys the game of baseball, when you remove a little bit of power from him, and power, I don't mean like authoritarian power. I just mean like agency, the ability to make decisions in real time. Um, if the data analytics are constantly steering you down a direction, I just don't know why that would be a compelling job. I don't know why you'd want to get into baseball when your agency is removed. I mean, that's the fun part of it. Like now that I'm coaching high school, I had a parents meeting and I said, look, I know you're going to know your son's averages and his numbers. I'm just not. I'm not going to know that. I'm going to know if he adds value to my team, and then I'll have a general sense. I'm sure my assistant coaches will share, but I just think, again, I'm not on the inside. I know data analytics. Um, they drive a lot of decision making in a lot of these organizations, and I'm sure some of it is good. I'm sure it's good. I just when I think about a coach, and if everything that he is doing is tied to these numbers, it has to be a little bit frustrating. It has to be.
Yeah, it's almost like you said before, you said it perfectly. It's like, what's the even point if you're every decision that you have to make, it's because you have like a hand tied behind your back, both your hands tied behind your back. Um, you had a son who plays, just got done playing college baseball, and I've seen you've talked a little bit about online about the transfer portal and things like that. It's obviously a topic that the recruiting process is very individualized for, each situation. Every situation's different. But is any advice you would give to people out there when it comes to this recruiting process or transfer portal, just based on what you've seen with your son, and then maybe just yourself as a coach on top of that?
Uh, wow. The game has changed in so many ways, and so many teams used to talk about family and a family atmosphere. And Nick Saban had his rant the other day on College Game Day about transformational versus transactional, and I think he nailed it. I just think that there's so much attention paid to winning and now NIL and the fact that you can leave, like everything feels so transactional that investments made in athletes, like I truly feel for the high school athlete now because you know I don't why would you entertain an uncertain unproven 18-year-old playing in a high school league when you've got a junior college or a proven mid-major that's proven it. And like to me, I don't have advice other than just find your trusted allies, ask them what they think, see if you can ask the personality of a certain coach, you know and at this point it's just if it is transactional, you're looking out for your best interest and you're hoping you find a good fit. But it feels like something has to happen. It feels like the NCAA has to intervene here some way because it's the wild, wild west everywhere.
Yeah, I don't really know. I always think about, what are some things that I could do to, put out online or content or whatever it is. And it's hard because, I mean, what am I going to do? Go out and just say, like, here's are the programs where the coaches you can trust. And then here are like, you can't, the thing is, if I do, if I
Cool.
do that, but I mean, I might be a hero, but I also might have, my name associated or like, might want to watch over my back shoulder.
No doubt, no doubt. Because I mean, again, like you could be wrong, and your understanding could be context driven, for and someone else might love them, and it's so yeah, it's you try to stay out of the weeds, and yet you do want to offer advice to folks. So yeah, I would just say trusted allies, trusted confidants. Find out what they say.
What advice are you giving to your current players, or are you talking about that, or will you give them advice on their recruiting process?
I certainly will when it comes to that. I'm 5 or 6 weeks in. I'm just getting to know our guys. Yeah, I think and some of my assistant coaches, we have some connections built up. But recruit life and real life are totally different. And college coaches, they have to win, and and every coach would love a bigger sample to pull from. So I think some of these they're not intentionally disingenuous. I mean, they're truly recruiting athletes to their campus because they in many ways believe what they sell. But then you have weeks and months before first pitch, and then other folks come to their attention, and they don't turn them away. So the initial contact, there might have been some honest dealings, but then 2 months later, you're like, these people weren't talked about, and now so it isn't like it's not like you intend to go out and be dishonest and duplicitous, but all of a sudden you show up on campus and nothing looks like anything what they promised. And I actually just if I'm not going to name the school, but I was told that they had to release 9 guys because they over recruited, and so here we are. And that's in the 2020. That's right. Or the 2025, I should say. Yeah. But it's I don't know. I don't know how you get around it. There's got to be some sort of guardrails that they can put in place. I'm not sure.
Kyle, I think you'll like this. A couple of one particular kid that I work with, his dad always comes in with him. He's a younger kid, and I think one time, maybe a few years ago, I sent him one of your chalkboard tweets,
Oh yeah.
and ever since then, every time I see him, he's always saying anything that you come out with, like he's a loyal fan of yours, and he even told me he's like, man, if Kyle Wagner was in Cincinnati, Ohio, like I would do anything to get my kid to be able to play for him, just based upon some of the stuff that you've put out. He loves it, and one of the things that I was watching recently is like I was seeing you're doing some whiteboard sessions, which I mean you're getting fancier, moving from the chalkboard to the
Well, no,
whiteboard, but
I have multiple. I have my home and my school. So yeah.
okay. Um, but I saw you brought up a great point where you said how everyone sees the world differently. and
Yeah.
said, and I was wondering if maybe you could talk about that because I think that, what one's perception, it could be completely different from somebody else. And you were talking about, why do hitters take pitches, and then you talked about perception. And could you explain kind of what you were talking about in that video?
Yeah, I think genetics is this lowest hanging fruit that we look at who we are and how we've been formed, and then that sort of dictates how we see the world. But there's a field called epigenetics, which literally says your environment can almost change your DNA. And I just did a presentation on Mike Tyson in my sports statistics class. And it was so funny. I was digging into this research on aggression and discipline and preparing to do this presentation. And then I'm reading about Mike Tyson, and they talked about one psychologist said he was the most traumatized individual they've ever encountered. He was arrested 38 times before he was 13 years old. And Mike Tyson, as anyone that knows Tyson, was just vicious. I mean, just an absolute mauler of a boxer. And I guess in many ways, I got to thinking, I was like, his environment created a disposition and a visual perception model where he was the hunter. I mean, he was out there and he was looking to annihilate people. And the more I think about that and how we trained our guys about aggression before discipline, uh, not only does it give you a little bit freedom, it makes your at bats more liberating. There's less caution. You don't feel like you're walking a tightrope 1,000 feet above the earth. I actually think that your brain starts to see the ball a little bit bigger, whereas others it's a smaller object. And I would just be guessing right with that. But when you watch, and that was sort of what the video was speaking on, is when you watch people move on balls that most take, you can't help but reflect and think, that the way in which they moved through their development, the constant praise for swinging, constant applauding for the miss, constant uh, expectations that when we get in the box and practice, we're letting it rip. Um, I can't help but think that your vision expands. You become more expansive. You see things others don't see. And so like that's my experience. All the best hitters that I had were grew up in this aggressive mindset, and then eventually when it gets to what I call the precision game there at the end against the best of the best, I think it narrows down. I think the game forces it. I guess that's my point is the game knows, and then the game will force your discipline when the time is right. But I don't like putting reins on really high level too soon. I think when aggression is coupled with the right kind of training, I think the eyes and the body work as one, like in sync. I think it's pretty special to see.
It almost makes you also just think like, man, like I think from what you said right there, like how the importance of parenting, and like how that car ride home too. I mean, even for myself, I was like, oh, I struck out. I was like, I'm looking at my dad right away. I remember that even just 9 years old, and I was like, oh, like, well, wonder what impact that had on that young brain the older that I got. So I think you're 100% spot on, 100%. I hope people really think about that because I think their words have a lot of meaning. And I know for myself too, I'm not a parent, but I am somebody's son. And when I was playing, at the end of the day, I looked back and I was like, I just wanted to make my parents proud of me,
Yep.
honestly. That's it. I think
It's
about it.
and I'm you got to be careful about the car ride. Just we don't know if you know the game of baseball and your son knows you know the game of baseball, or your daughter knows you know the softball game, and you drive home in a quiet car, they're left to process like, well, doesn't he want to share what he saw? Doesn't he care? Like it isn't just, hey, I love to watch you play. Because if I would have done that to my son, I mean, they would have said, Dad, come on, like give it up. Like you know, like, come on. So we would have honest conversations, but again, I was very much coach. I mean, very much coach and dad. Really, really hard balancing act there. But um, I did there is a whole lot of that that goes on when you let it rip. And I got a lot of strange looks when my guys would swing and miss and I was clapping. And that continued, that happened for very, very long periods of time. Um, I just, I think too, I think some coaches are optimists. I think some coaches are pessimists. I think some coaches, when you see a swing and a miss, you see that as their fate. Like me, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I see a swing and a miss, and I'm like, okay, the intent was there. The next one is yours. I truly believe that sometimes it is framed just through that optimistic, pessimistic lens. It could be as simple as that sometimes.
So you would, at times when one of your players would swing and miss, you'd clap as a coach?
Up until they got into high school, like almost every time. Yeah,
Really?
almost every time. Yeah, because I just when you're when you're coaching young kids and those pitchers don't command the zone, your kids are afraid. Like a lot of times they're afraid, and those best pitchers the last thing I want to do is have them be afraid and cautious, right? Like you might be you're probably going to be afraid against the big physical specimen that throws hard. Okay, well, if that's the case, if fear is a given, let's at least be aggressive, right? And so now you can at least protect yourself, and that's why I'm applauding because I'm like, yes, that is an act of courage needs rewarded, and so that's what I was and I just think that's liberating. I think the parents love it. I think it's all about make good decisions. And when the younger you are, the courageous acts need rewarded more than outcomes. I think eventually over time, with practice, they become one and the same. Acts of courage become base hits and doubles. But when you're younger, that isn't a given, not a given at all.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. I'm gonna steal a lot of that stuff. That's great. I think one of the things that I've seen you talk about, over the years, we've talked about, as you've mentioned today, about being aggressive and the importance of that. But I've also seen you talk about parents, and I think I've seen you talk about a few times about, letting parents watch and practice because there's some coaches that they don't want that, they don't allow that. What's your viewpoint on getting parents involved? There's some coaches who have a closed door policy, some are open. Like I'm curious to hear what you have to say about parents in general within the regards of your team.
So, every decision that a coach and parent make should be for the benefit of the athlete. And so, to answer that question without first considering the athlete, I think it probably misses the mark a little bit. I have asked my students and my athletes, when your parents are there, is it comforting or is it unnerving? Like, and you would think that it's all comforting, but not for everyone. There are some athletes that feel pressure when mom and dad are there because when mom or dad are there, they often create conversation that is not productive. So to answer your question first, I have the first thing I did at parents meeting is I said, you're all welcome. You're all welcome. I'd love to reinforce what it is that I'm sharing. But having said that, if you go down a road where you're trying to talk to your athlete about something that I don't actually approve of, what not necessarily technique wise, like I don't think they would do that. I think when they come to my practices and they see what it is I'm teaching, I don't think they would entertain that. I think they might entertain something about maybe effort, with a kid doesn't look like he's given great effort. And so I tell the parents, I said, look, if your kid needs coached, me or one of my assistants is going to coach them. Like, and I promise we are. And so you don't necessarily need to feel obligated to do that. Like, I promise we will. And I think sometimes parents intervene and try to do over coaching their kid because they see an apathetic, complacent coach that maybe only coaches the top 3 or 5 athletes and these other ones get neglected. So I try to tell them like I care about all your kids. I'm gonna do my best to coach them hard. If I'm ignoring something, I'm ignoring something intentionally. Um, but I do have an open practice. I want them to be there. I try to be loud, demonstrative. I try to share as much as I can. That's why I post what I post. I want them to know exactly where I'm coming from. If they want to come and talk to me, let's do it outside of others' eyes, so they don't think that you're trying to manipulate playing time. But I'd be glad to share anything that I'm doing. But yeah, I think first and foremost, we have to consider the athlete and we have to know, do you like when your mom and dad are there? I think sometimes that's a question, an assumption that we make, and that isn't always true. So, I've recently just learned that within the past couple of years that I always assumed that they love mom and dad being there, and that isn't the case.
Yeah, actually, I would have been one of those kids. I wouldn't have wanted one of my parents there at all. So that's again, that's why I love talking to you because it's something I never would have thought of even like having that conversation with the kid. So let me ask you a follow-up on that. So how do you go about doing that? Do you go one by one with each kid? Like, are you comfortable with your parents there? And if they say no, do you tell the parents that particular set of parents? Do you ask them not to come, or how do you handle that?
I would do a survey. I would do a survey and ask that question and then get a percentage. And then I would present the answer to the parents at back to school, or not back to school, but just like the parents' night. And I would say, look, these are the responses. And this is a little bit disconcerting. Like I would want 100% response that they want you there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good parent or a bad parent. This is just where your son or daughter lives. And I've done a lot of research, and one of my favorite books, The Orchid and the Dandelion, it talks about highly reactives versus non-reactives. And some of our athletes are highly reactive, like they are ultra sensitive to things, right? And our loving might be one of those things that they're highly reactive to. So I would share it at a parents meeting, and I would say, you guys owe it to yourself to talk to your son and say, do you want me there? And then just hope he gives you honest feedback. And if he says, yeah, Dad, no, I love it, then show up. And if he says, I'd rather you stay away, then don't come. Right. But I don't need to be involved in that. You guys need to be involved in that. That's a relationship that you guys deserve to have.
That's another good point of, I guess, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything necessarily wrong as a parent. There's no right or wrong. It's just, everyone's a little bit different. What'd you say there? What was the
It's
phrase
called
for highly
the
sensitive?
orchid and the dandelion.
Okay.
I did a coaching clinic for a bunch of other sports too, and it was one of my biggest takeaways is that these orchids often set your culture. If an orchid needs incredible nourishment and great environment to thrive, but if you don't give them that, they'll be suppressed. Whereas a dandelion is sort of like a flatliner, where it doesn't matter what kind of environment, they're going to be okay either way, right? And so there are many athletes that mom, dad there, take it or leave it, not a big deal. But there are some that absolutely will go one direction or the other. And it's, I'm not exactly sure what the percentage is, but you've got plenty of highly reactives out there that environment, the who is present has an impact for sure.
I think I've seen that you've done some, you put out some content recently when it comes to like actually, what is it, a course, or there was some sort of thing that I saw that
Yeah.
you put out. What exactly was that? Because I want to maybe send people to that if they want to learn
Yeah,
more
it's
about.
called Coaching Beyond the X's and O's. I When I was out of baseball for a while, you look from a distance and you realize that all of the strategic stuff we talk about is just a small portion of how we create culture and how we ultimately get success. We attend these ABCA conventions, and we're interested in defense or offense or pitching or all those things. But the work that I came across, his name is J. Richard Hackman. He suggests that 60%, 90% is actually outside the tactical realm. Uh, and it's on your self-efficacy, it's on the roles that you assume. And so I created a coaching series, a 9-part video series, trying to hit as much as I can with that, over and beyond baseball. I've done a bunch of stuff here recently when I was outside the dugout because I had time, but I was proud of that, and I've had some good feedback. Most of it is good, and Orchid and the Dandelion was video 3 in that series.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a great point again, where it's like we as coaches always go to the mechanics or with the latest technology or whatever it is, but it's like what actually moves the needle the most. Like a lot of times it's not the sexy stuff that maybe you see on Twitter and
Yeah.
maybe what I mean. So have you ever? I assume you've gone down those rabbit holes before from maybe a pitching standpoint or hitting standpoint of the biomechanics. Have you ever from a coaching standpoint, been like, this is what we're going to focus on and made it more of a mechanical driven, or have you been always somebody who always had the context of being like, there's a place for this, but it's not going to take over the program.
I believe I believe adaptable beats optimal, which means I think our bodies are constantly adapting to the stressors we place on it. So, Green Light Hitting was the book that I wrote in 2012. I've adapted it a little bit, but when I think about how I train my athletes, I work from that model. I know it best. It's worked for me and the athletes that I've coached, but there's so many good people out there sharing stuff that I will constantly uh, take some of what I see and share. I mean, I'm like everyone else. I'm showing stuff to my guys now, like, hey, this is what I'm talking about. And but yeah, I think there's an A+ swing that people should be striving for. I just think pitchers are really, really good, and I think we need to recognize that that A+ swing has a variance to it, and if your A+ becomes a C- quickly based upon who you're facing, you might have to start considering how you narrow that variance, how you can start living in that B range swing and start fighting pitches off. And so, yeah, I think there's an optimal. I think everyone should strive for optimal, but ultimately, I think the most adaptable player wins.
You've coached some really good players in the past. Who's the best player you've coached?
Anthony Volpe, just just the way he sees the game, he just sees it. He's always seen it well. He's super aggressive, just incredible teammate. There were some players that did certain things better than Anthony, but as a whole, Anthony was always the one that you're like, yeah, he's probably gonna make it. He's just a great baseball player.
What do you mean by see the game differently?
So I tell the story. He was 10, and there was a runner on first, 2 outs. He was playing shortstop against us. And catcher blocked strike 3, and the runner took off to second. And instead of the catcher just picking the ball up and throwing to first to end the inning, he somehow forgot the out. So he picked it up and fired to second to get the lead runner. Well, Anthony comes sprinting in as a 10-year-old, cuts the ball off 10 feet in front of second base and redirected it to end the inning. And I remember looking at my assistants thinking, what was that? Like who would ever do that? I like if a high school kid did that or if a college kid did that, you'd be impressed. But he always saw the game really well from a young age, and he's done multiple things like that that you just say, he always felt like a step ahead. So Anthony,
Anthony, I like that. What are
yeah.
some of the things that you're looking into researching? Like, what's the next whiteboard session going to be? What are you digging into?
Um, So the Playmaker's Advantage is a podcast that I was just listening to and a book that I've read, and the Playmaker's Advantage talks about like we have to reward good decisions, and the great athletes take the first best option. I think that's a phrase that I'm probably going to go down here this road here soon. The first best option,
Hmm.
and what that means is the first best option is not often the perfect option. And your playmakers, whereas your lesser athletes are constantly scanning for perfect, that hesitation prevents them from reaching their potential.
Mm.
And so great athletes, whether it be Joe Montana or Walter Payton or Wayne Gretzky or I'm guessing Mike Trout, when they see something, they take the first best option. And in the playmaker's advantage, and the second book was the playmaker's decision. I'm just really curious how that aggression, it seeks that and it sees it faster than most, right? If you're actually scanning and hunting your visual field, you might see that first best option faster than most. So you'll probably see a whiteboard something on the first best option.
That's awesome. I can't wait. Uh, Kyle, is there anything else that you would like to add, you think that would be beneficial for coaches out there to hear, or parents or players, or just anything that comes to mind at all before we wrap up?
I read so much, I explore so much. There's so many people that I respect. A lot of those people are outside the baseball world, and they can help the baseball world. Um, I would say if you haven't read David Epstein's stuff, Range, I would encourage you to read Range. Range gives you a macro view on all these travel sports that we invest in. I think sometimes we are chasing the prize, and I think sometimes we're not always aware of what even the best of intentions do from a long-term perspective. So I'm just going to throw that out there. David is research on range.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, appreciate you coming on. We'll put the video series link in the show notes along with Range. But thanks again, man. It was great catching up and great to see you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.